Hey, so welcome to this video on the removal of things within your sales game. It's not always about adding things, and that's where people go wrong within training. It's always about adding something else to your game to get better, adding this to your game to get better. Well, what about actually evaluating what you need to remove from your day-to-day actions to make you better? So let's give you a few examples of what we've seen makes people better when they remove it from their sales game. So let's run through this with some examples to help you to have a think about what you need to remove to make yourself better and take your sales skills to the next level. So first and foremost is the removal of negative thinking. So I want you to take a time out to think about how many times you have a negative thought. Now that could be right from the off in the morning when you get up and you say, oh, I'm knackered. I'm tired. How many of us have done that, yeah? So you've got to think about you're starting your day off programming yourself, telling yourself that you're actually tired. And your subconscious mind is running all of the time and it's trying to then prove to you that you're tired. So what negative thinking are you thinking out right from the off, even before you get to your work, even before you start your sales calls? So negative thinking about the beginning of your day, negative thinking during your work day. That could be blame game on data. You're negatively thinking about the data that you're calling. You're negatively thinking about the people that you're speaking to. It may even be negative thoughts about your own sales skills themselves. So you have to be aware of how you think negatively and how you can remove that one piece at a time to make yourself better. You know, it's okay people telling you to think positive, but we all know that it's not just as easy as that. We're human beings and we're going to have negative triggers from time to time. So what is it that you do then when it happens? So the key thing is, first and foremost, is you will now become aware of negative thinking. You know, when you make a negative statement, you'll become aware of it, and that's the first step to curing it. Secondly, replace that negative thought immediately with a positive alternative. And if you continue to do this, you will eradicate most of the negativity throughout your day. So first and foremost, let's work on negative thinking and getting that removed from your daily practices. The next one is the fear of rejection. So I want you to remove the fear of rejection if you have that. A lot of people, when they're making a high volume sales calls, tend to have that fear of rejection. People are worried about what they're going to say to them. They're worried if they can't overcome it. They're worried about the amount of no's that they have to go through in a day. But let me just tell you this without saying it's a numbers game, because people will always say that it's a numbers game. And it's partially correct. But if you can have a sales skills at a certain level and the right volume of numbers, then it's not just about a volume game. It's not just about the numbers. It's about the sales skills that go along with those numbers. So don't fear rejection. Rejection is fine. It's something that we all have to go through. In fact, there was really good actual story about the Olympic champions, and somebody interviewed the gold medal winners, and they interviewed the people who came, bottom to last, and they said to them before they went into that, they says, if you don't mind me asking, how were you feeling? And so they interviewed the bottom people first, and they said, well, I was feeling pretty nervous. And they said to me, describe what was the things that were happening there to make it nervous. So can you describe that to me? And they said, yes, well, my heart was beating really fast. My palms were sweaty. I could feel, the blood pumping through my whole body. And I was kind of shaking a bit. And they said, okay. And then they spoke to the gold medal winners and they asked them, how did you feel before the race? And they said, well, I felt excited. And they said, oh, right. Could you describe excited to us? And they went, yes. They says, well, my heart was pumping. He says, my palms were sweaty. I could feel the blood pumping all over me and I was shaking. They had actually just labelled it differently. They felt the exact same way. They were going through the same physiology, but they labelled it differently. So on the fear of rejection, the removal of that could be just a case of relabeling it. You're one step closer to the next one. Every single piece of rejection that you get, you're practicing. That's your practice shot. That's another practice shot. You're getting the reps in. So don't fear rejection. Keep going and actually embrace it or relabel it. Okay, the next one is the removal of distractions, and this is huge, especially in this day and age. You know, we are being interrupted all of the time with emails, with notifications, with messages, and it's social media is everywhere. So everybody wants your attention. So you have to get focused. You have to put, first and foremost, you have to switch things off. Let me go through a few little statistics that will just bring this to light here. 83% of millennials open messages within 90 seconds of receiving them. 83% open them within 90 seconds of receiving them. 2.1% is the average hours, so that's 2.1 hours per day in the workplace people are in distraction. 2.1 hours of your workday in distraction. Here's another one that may open your eyes. 11 minutes, that's in the workplace. We are distracted every 11 minutes. And interestingly, the studies shown say that it takes 23 minutes on average to be back fully immersed in full focus. What's also known in the sports game is in the zone. So what does that tell us then? It probably tells us that we're hardly ever, if at all, in the zone with full focus at our workplace. So you've got to think about the removal of distractions and what you're going to do. Now, emails is a big, huge distraction. And we've spoke about, you should use AET, which is allocated email time. Just jumping into your emails at specific times that you've got placed in your day to check upon them. Now, only you will know how often that has to be. It may be 3 times a day. It may be once every hour. But you will only know best, from what your day looks like. But it's trying to put in allocated email time so that you're just not jumping in and out of them continuously or spontaneously throughout the day. So the other thing is only check your messages maybe every hour. If you're working on a computer, try and close things that are off-putting to you. Your social media things like maybe Facebook and your emails and any other distractions that you may receive, any other communication channels if you're actually focused on a piece of work. Plan your day with scheduled block time. So look at your calendars and schedule in specific periods of block time where you're going to be doing specific tasks. Now, the beauty of scheduling is, instead of a to-do list, is scheduling. The brain tries to get the work done within the schedule that you give it. Whereas a to-do list, as you'll probably be well aware of, we tend to move them, don't we? We tend to say, well, I'll just add that to it and I'll move that to tomorrow. But with a schedule, you try and get it done within the time frame. So plan your day with block time and get everything scheduled. That will help with your removal of distractions. Take good breaks every 90 minutes will help you as well. Short bouts of commitment, of focused work, and reward yourself. That may be as simple as I'm going to go and make myself a coffee once I get this done. It may be setting a timer and thinking I'm going to fully focus on these calls for the next hour. Or I'm going to do 10 calls with no interruptions, and when I've got them complete, I'm going to take a break. It may be little things like that keep you going. So that is all little sort of tips to help you with distractions. And it was Dr. Larry Rosen that said, we have to retrain our brains to respond based on a set schedule rather than spontaneous cues, alerts, or notifications. It's something that we have to learn now. So the removal of distractions is probably going to be one of the biggest impact to your sales days and to your sales game if you can get it right. Now, on that note of distractions, it's not only the distractions like social media and alerts and emails, but it's also the distractions during your sales conversation. Are you fully immersed with your prospect? Are you giving them the full attention, or are you being distracted with things that are happening round about you? So that's another thing to remove and give the full focus to your customer. Now, I'll give you a couple of little tips on this. One of them is to imagine that the spotlight is on them. Just like in a theatre, the spotlight moves to your prospect when they're talking, and then the spotlight goes on you when you're talking. But your full focus, if you can think about it when you're sitting at a theatre, your focus is on who that spotlight is on. And that's what I want you to imagine if you're a very visual learner, is to think about the spotlight being on your prospect when you're listening to them, when they're talking, and not on other things that are going off and around in your office. So that's another thing to remove, is just on that note of distractions, is removing the distractions of what's going on when your actual prospects are on there talking to you. Now, another thing that you can look at removing is the removal of outdated sales techniques. You know, the feel, felt, found technique. All these other outdated techniques of always be closing, pre-closing them hard, pushing them into the close. Nobody wants that happening anymore. See, you've got to remember that people and customers are now a lot more sales savvy. They do a lot more research before you're interacting with them, or before they actually approach you. And the old outdated sales techniques no longer work. People spot sales techniques. People hate being sold to, but they love to buy. So the secret is really understanding if you can help them. And that's where I speak about the mindset of a doctor and the inquisitive nature of a Sherlock Holmes. You have to see if you can help them and not think about selling to them. So what I want you to think about is the removal of focusing on selling, on making a sale, because that's going back to the old school tactics that don't work. What you have to do is think about how you can help them. The mindset of a doctor. When you go to a doctor's surgery, they'll sit you down and they'll ask you an open question about what seems to be the problem, how can I help? Then they have to probe further to see if they can help you, because you know that if they just write you a prescription, writing a prescription without diagnosis is malpractice. So you have to do the same in your sales game, and it's really about the customer wanting to buy and then the customer selling to you on your well-crafted questions that you gave them. So removal of old, outdated sales tactics and pressure tactics no longer work. So make sure you're removing them from your sales game and you're becoming a new consultative seller, the mindset of a doctor. Can I help this customer? Now, the next thing that we've noticed is if you're preparing for your sales calls, doing a little bit of research, which is all good, it's the removal of over-analysis, right? So you've heard of the old golf analogy, analyze to paralyze. So that is what's happening. I've seen it many times where someone is doing so much research, they get the fear of picking up the phone, the fear of actually making that call, because they're analysing, and then they start thinking about how the sale's going to go. Then they start thinking about what they're going to say, and they just spend about an hour thinking things over, overlooking the website, overlooking every aspect of the individual that they're going to be hopefully speaking to. And then what can happen is they pick up the phone and they're not available. And you've just wasted about 20 minutes of your time. So the removal of too much analysis, too much preparation beforehand is definitely one to work on. And I've seen that with quite a few salespeople in my days. Now, I am not saying that you shouldn't prepare. You absolutely should. And we speak about that in this program. But you should have a time limit on it. Get the detail, the key things that you need, and then make the calls. So the removal of over-analysing the unnecessary sales steps that you really don't need in there, and that will help you. Now, another one I want to share with you is the removal of what-if thinking. So people can get so attached to the main goal, which is hitting their target, that they actually forget to just get involved and get focused on the process. So the removal of thinking in the future too much, or the removal of thinking in the past too often, because when you do so, you're not in the present moment. Only in the present moment can you have everything working to perfection. Your listening skills, your questioning skills, your objection handling skills, everything that you're doing there, you're in the present moment. So you have to remove the worry of the what ifs. The worry about, if I don't get this, I'm going to be X amount off my target. That's another day gone. You're worried about a target that's been set at the start of the month. And you're focused on that. Now, when you're focused on that, you are thinking about the future. You are not in the present moment. So the removal of thinking either in the future too much or in the past too much is going to affect your performance in the present moment. So the removal of outer thinking, either the future or the past, is a very key one to work on. Now, we have spoke about negative thinking, but another thing I just want to highlight here is the removal of self-talk. So we're very, very guilty of being very hard on ourselves when we're not performing at our best. But if you think about it, if your mind is the computer and you're programming yourself with negative talk, then that is going into your subconscious and you're in a continuous loop and you end up in a cycle which is taking you all the way down, and it's just a continuous cycle. So it doesn't help you. What you have to do is change your immediate thinking, replace it with the positive, and then get right back into the success cycle, if you like. So negative self-talk, be kind to yourself, say kind things to yourself, and stay clear of that negative self-talk. Another thing I feel salespeople need to remove, and that is the removal of assuming. There's a lot of people that I see will assume that this customer is not going to buy, will assume that this customer is not the right fit. They will have all these assumptions going into a sales call or into a sales meeting, and you cannot do that. I've seen time and time again where people are assuming one thing and actually it was the other. And there's loads of examples of this if you go through time and you read sales books where someone's walked onto a car lot and they were going to buy a car. Someone assumed that they couldn't afford it just by the way that they were dressed, and then they found out later on that they bought a more expensive car from a different place because they didn't like the way they were treated. So we have to be very careful on assumptions. And so one thing that will help with your sales game is the removal of assuming and having a clear mind going into it and treating every prospect the same. In that way, you will find that you will always get the right result at the end. Whether they're right, whether they're a right fit, we don't know. But at least you're not assuming things at the start, which affects how you will talk to them, how you will listen to them, and how you will treat them through the sales process. So let's remove the assumptions and then clear your mind and treat every single prospect in the same way. So here's what I want you to do, because this is a training program. It's not about watching videos and thinking that was great, that was interesting. Let's get into the nitty-gritty on how you're going to do this to make yourself better. So let's think about yourself for a moment. What are the key things that you need to remove within your sales game? That could be things that we've spoke about. It could be something that we've not mentioned. But it could be the removal of distractions, the removal of social media. It could be the removal of assuming. It could be the removal of self-talk, negative self-talk. It could be the removal of negativity within your day. It could be the removal of the blame game, blaming the data, blaming the time, blaming the industry. It could be that you're blaming the economic climate. So let's think about what you need to remove to actually make you a better salesperson, a better performer, and overall a more consultative seller. So this is the key things now. It's the exercises that will make the difference. So I want you to take time out now, use one of our worksheets or just grab a book and take notes on deep dive into your own mindset, your own thinking. What do you need to remove to take your sales game to a higher level? Take some time out now, have a good think about that, write them all down, and then execute them one by one as we move forward in your sales week. Speak to you soon.